The end. Every story begins with once upon a time and ends with the end. What does that mean, the end? The end of the story. Does that mean everyone just stopped being and there is nothing else? Surely not. They lived happily ever after. That's often the end, right? They lived happily ever after. So it's not an end, right? An end is not actually an end. It's some kind of a shift, a change, a line drawn under one episode so that a new episode can begin, something like that. So the notion of end is really an opportunity for the space for a new beginning, something like that.
Where do these stories exist anyway? In the words on a paper, on the pages of a novel, the end marks the end of the words, but the story exists in the imagination of the reader. And so the story can continue into a new beginning, a new adventure that's being rewritten and remembered and relived. Or maybe simply open the door for a new mode of functioning and a new story to begin. The crossover between the fictionalization of beginnings and ends and stories, and that the end, the 6 letters and a space hammering down.
It's somewhat arbitrary, right? The end. It's in, yeah, because the story is an abstract thing in the imagination of the author, in the imagination of the reader, and so the drawing to a close of that story is an arbitrary thing. So let's try and extend this notion of endings out into the actual world. What things end? I mean, I guess individual lives come to an end. At least that's what it looks like. I mean, who knows? There's no way to say that for sure, right? But it seems as though egos at least come to an end, if not the whole of our being, but the ego at least comes to an end. It stops, it's oblivion. So end is nothingness, right? For something to end, it must actually stop and become nothing.
The end is an absolute negation of what came before. Maybe an end can just be a disruption, a space to start something new. Potentially, every closing of the eyes that happens automatically is the end of that vision of the world. Every time I open my eyes again, I'm seeing something new. Like a heartbeat, new beginnings with every end of the closure of the eyelids.
So why even have this notion of endings? If it is in fact just a new beginning, why even have this notion of endings? Why is it not a new becoming or something like that? It's the more this goes on, the more I'm actually troubled by the very concept of end itself. Why do we even have this concept in our language? Because it seems to me that transformation is actually what's going on here, right? It's not an ending, it's just a stage, it's just a step on the road. And so yeah, what's starting to feel really interesting is why we even have this concept in our language if it bears no connection to what actually happens in reality.
Death maybe marks our susceptibility to the permanence of ending, especially in sanitized societies where death is something so distant and yet to be feared. The end in language, when languages are very binary, the human brain has a binary need, or at least a categorical need. So binaries easily accomplish that. So we have beginning and end. But as soon as we get into complexity, those binaries often break down and become symbiotic. So it's really interesting why the end is so prevalent in language.
It occurs that the end of things makes more sense if you restrict yourself to the physical realm. You can have the end of a road, right? You can have the end of a room. The end of a room is marked by a wall or a door. You know, the end of the road is there's just no more road, right? And so in the physical world, I think you possibly can reach this. So maybe the end is the boundary between what is manifest and what is yet to be manifest, right? And so it is potentially transformative, because there is always more coming. There is always a future about to arrive, and yet, yeah, there's something about, you could build more road, right? So it's not the end of the road in a permanent sense, but it's the end of the road. It hasn't been built yet.
Which raises the idea of, what about ends that happen in our minds? Beliefs that end, ideologies that are no longer ascribed to, religions that are lost, identities that are reforged and rebirthed, so the old identity ends. Again, there's this need in the word for end to make it a very clear-cut divide before and after, whereas usually transitions are not jumps. There is a zeitgeist that leads up to them.
It feels as though all of those examples of religions and personal transformation and changes of ideology and shifts in paradigm, they are transformations. They're not, you know, the new personality is built on top of the old one. You know, it's not a complete, it's not like the old one has been completely pushed away and an entirely new one has been inserted. It has been transformed, right? Healing has taken place, transformation has taken place, deeper understanding has taken place, more embodied sense of being in the world has taken place, whatever it might be. But it is a transformation. And the memory of what was before is still alive. So it's not ended in the sense that it no longer exists in any way, because the access to the feeling of it, the access to the memory of it is still there. So it's not.
It's not lost to the decisiveness of those words. It's a new attitude, a new mode, a function. So if the end is easier to understand in geographic or spatial terms, the road, the room, the immediate tangibility of my being and a wall that blocks me, and how that transcribes to the imagined or idealized realm, how then do we stop seeing these shifts as so categoric? The idea of paradigm shifts and incommensurability, usually shifts happen when there's a crossover and a building and a growing.